S2L12 is called lines that intersect circles, and in 12.1 we're going to learn about something called secants. So before we get into that, I want to review just kind of like the way that we write lines or segments in math. So a line is something that like kind of continues forever. So let's say I have a line, I would show it with arrows going in both directions, and let's say there's 2 points on that line, A and B. And if I were to write that, I would write it as AB with a little arrow over the top of both of them, or sorry, a little line over the top of both of them with an arrow going in both directions, and that would be line AB. Versus if it's segment AB, that would be just a segment with endpoints at A and B. A segment is just like a small portion of a line. It doesn't continue like in both directions forever or anything like that. And the way that we would write that is AB with a little line on top, but no arrows going like in either direction to show that it is just a segment and it does have endpoints. So a secant is a line or a segment that intersects a circle at 2 points. The fact that it intersects a circle at 2 points is important. Hopefully it doesn't get confusing with a chord. A chord would be something that like has endpoints on the circle, but you can see in this picture right here, a secant is like kind of, it can be a line or a segment that crosses through, but it's gonna make like, it for sure will cross through the circle. It's not gonna like kind of stop right at it. That would be something that we would call a chord. It can have like one, I guess, side that doesn't necessarily cross through the circle. So like for example, let's say like this didn't cross through right here, but as long as like one side goes all the way through the circle and kind of continues on the other side, then it would be a secant. Okay, so example 1, state the following parts of the circle. Some of these are review, really like the first two are review, so diameter and chord, that word I just mentioned before. So for the diameter, it's really a chord that crosses through the center of the circle. So its endpoints attach to like kind of the circumference of the circle and it crosses through the center. So for this circle, the diameter is, sorry, that's a little bit crooked, but the diameter would be the segment VS. So it would be VS, and it just has like endpoints. It doesn't have like arrows on the other side, so it would be a segment. So segment VS. And then a chord is a segment in a circle that kind of attaches to the end of the circumference of the circle, but it doesn't cross through the center. So in this case, it would be segment UT or TU. The order doesn't matter, so you can write it either way. Just like for like the diameter, I could have wrote it as SV instead of VS. So order doesn't matter there, but for the chord, it would be segment UT. And then the secant line, so there's a difference between like a secant line and a secant segment. That can be both types. A line continues forever, a segment does not. It really, the main difference is like how we write it. So a secant line is like a line that goes on forever. So like this would be the line that goes from, it crosses through P and W. So we would say P W with the like line above it with the arrows to show that it is a line. Now here's kind of like a little bit of the silly part. So a secant segment is that still that same kind of like segment where it's starting, or it's not, I guess not the same as line PW, but it's a segment that starts at P and it goes until W. And I know it almost looks like the same thing, but again, like a line is the one that kind of continues forever. And then the segment itself is like just from P to W only. It doesn't continue on past that. So we would write it as PW with the line on top without the arrows to show that it's a segment. And then the last part, the external part of a secant, is like asking you to describe what part of it is like outside of the circle. So the secant, like we've already kind of labeled it, that's the line that's in blue/purple. And so the external part, the part that's outside of that circle, is just from Q to W only. And it's just a segment. So we would say from Q to W or segment QW. that part that's kind of highlighted in red over the purple, or like this section of the line, QW. Okay, 12.2, this one is called tangents, which is just like another line that has to do with circles. So starting up at the top of this section, a line that intersects a circle at one point is called a tangent. So a secant is 2 points and a tangent is 1 point, and that difference is important. The point where a tangent line intersects with a circle is known as the point of tangency. So if we look at this graphic on the right here, line AC is a tangent line because it just like barely touches the circle. It's not going to cross through it. It just kind of touches the outside. And then that point of tangency is point B. That's where like the line hits the circle. And then the third section, a tangent never enters the inside of the circle. So when you're identifying tangent lines or segments, don't look at anything that crosses through the middle of the circle. It only touches the circle at exactly 1 point and continues on the exterior or the outside. And then the fourth section, a segment that is part of a tangent line and has one endpoint at the point of tangency is called a tangent segment. So that's what's over here on the right. So like segment LM, that would be called a tangent segment. And a tangent segment has to have one of its endpoints on the point of tangency. So that's what I was saying right here. So a segment that is part of a tangent line and has one endpoint at the point of tangency, like point L is, that's called a tangent segment. Okay, example 1, state the following parts of the circle. So we're going to state first the points of tangency. So those are the points where we are like crossing, or not crossing, but where like our lines or segments are just barely touching the circle. So before we actually like kind of find our points of tangency, one thing it would be a good idea to get in the habit of is if you are looking for like tangents specifically and you see a line that is crossing through the inside of the circle, you have to disregard that line because it's going to be tempting to like, for example, in this case, it's AE. It might be tempting to like look at it, but that line is not tangent because it doesn't only cross through at 1 point, it crosses through at 2 points. So it's not a tangent, so we would like just completely disregard that line. So we're not going to worry about it because it's not tangent. Again, tangent is just it touches at 1 point on the circle and it never comes inside the circle. Okay, so now the points of tangency, those are the points where the lines are touching the circle. So we have one right here at point T, and then we have one right here at point V. So we would say point T and point V. Okay, so now the tangent lines, it's asking for like what lines specifically are tangent to the circle, not necessarily like lines and line segments. So now I'm ignoring the purple one, I'm looking at just the blue and just the red, and the blue is not a line because it doesn't have the arrows on like each end of it. But the red one is a line because you do see the arrows, so that's going to be our only tangent line for this graphic, for this example. So our tangent line would be YZ. Line YZ, or you can switch the order and do ZY. You just have to make sure that you put the line symbol above it. But again, we don't use the blue because it's a segment. It doesn't have arrows on the outside. Okay, and then for the tangent segments, this one we will have a bit more to kind of pull from. We have to pick every single segment that has an endpoint at the point of tangency, and there's actually going to be 4 of them. So the first one, I'm going to just work off the red one since we just did that. So the first one would be from T to Y. So like it has the endpoint T at the point of tangency, and it goes to point Y. So we would say segment T, Y, or YT. And then there's also the other side of T, so from T to Z, that's another tangent segment. So TZ or ZT. And then now we can move on to the blue one since we're just talking in terms of segments. So there's the point of tangency V, and that goes to Q. So we would say V, Q. And then there's the other side of V as well that goes to R. So it would be VR, segment VR. And again, you can switch the orders of all those letters and they'll still be kind of the same exact segment, but I just want to stress that a tangent segment, it'll have one endpoint on that point of tangency. So I would not describe a tangent segment as QR, because QR, the endpoints are Q and R, and neither of those are the points of tangency.